this president and this Secretary of Defense are acting against the law, and in a normal time, this would be grounds for removing both. And the second thing is that this president has revealed his racism in his comments about Somalia and the Somalians who are in Minnesota, and this conduct by a president of the United States is absolutely disgraceful, a black mark against us as Americans.
You're so right. The remarks of the president were loathsome. And because you've mentioned it, I'll start there. I want to get to Hegseth, but I'll start with his comments about Somalia. Now, just to be clear to those who might not be following this beat by beat, he gets to Somalia through the question about Afghani immigration and asylum. Of course, this shooter in Washington, D.C., the National Guard troops, he was Afghani. And then the asylum and immigration shutdown of these 19 different countries, that is how we get to Somalia being part of the conversation. And, other countries that Donald Trump considers, they're third world nations. Many are fleeing these nations to come to America, and they're fleeing the Civil War. They're fleeing at great personal peril, but be that as it may, that's how we get to Somalia. Here is the president at the cabinet meeting talking about the Somalis.
But when I watch what is happening in Minnesota, the land of 1,000 lakes, or however many lakes they have, they got a lot of lakes, but this beautiful place, and I see these people ripping it off, and now I'm understanding, and you're going to look into that, I hear they ripped off Somalians, ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing.
For a moment to comment on the robust community that is associated with Somali immigration. I mean, just it almost doesn't bear mention, but on the other hand, I feel like we have to mention it.
No, you don't. What you have to mention is the fact that this president is a racist. His attack is on people of color. And let me tell you, as a white guy, I can see a racist when I hear what he has to say. And not only that, I want to remind you that all of the elected officials in Minnesota who have spoken out on this have condemned the president's comments. They've all said this is nonsense. But do you understand? We are tolerating as a nation the most corrupt administration in American history. We are tolerating a president who is a blatant, outright racist. We are tolerating as a nation a president and a Secretary of Defense who are violating all the norms of American function. And I can only tell you, I am furious that there isn't an outcry. And when I listen to Senator Mullen of Ohio, it's shameful that somebody like that serves in the United States Senate and has that kind of ability to make those expressions. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll say one thing, John, and just it's a cold slap in the face. But as you know, I don't think much of a large group of humanity, and I think a large group of humanity is actually represented by people like John Wayne Mullen. I think he actually is, and we talk about we need our representatives in Congress. On some level, he is representing people who feel and think the way John Wayne Mullen does.
He may represent certain people, but he doesn't represent the true face of the United States of America. And what I'm upset about, what I'm furious about, is this real lack of silence. Now, to be fair, Republicans, including chairs of major committees in the House and Senate, are now saying that there has to be a thorough investigation of what has happened under the leadership of Donald Trump and the Secretary of Defense. This is something I'm waiting for. And you know that the admiral, let me tell you something about scapegoating somebody. Talk about setting somebody else to be the blame for all of this. This admiral is a man who is highly regarded, has a great military reputation. He is going to give testimony behind closed doors tomorrow. And I can't wait to hear what he has to say. If I were him, I would do everything I could to expose what is happening. And let me remind you, and I know you've discussed this, other members of the military who have resigned their positions because of their fury at what Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are doing to the reputation of America's military. We are the greatest nation in the world in terms of how we are viewed. And what these guys are doing is tearing us down. Ultimately, and I know you and I may not agree on this, but ultimately this will all be exposed. But I don't want to leave the verdict to history. I want to be on the record, and I might commend you, as you have been on the record, as calling all of this what it really is, a disgrace.
It's a disgrace, and there's also a strategic and philosophical hypocrisy, which will come as no surprise from an administration, and I'd say a party now, the GOP. And I understand that there's hypocrisy on both sides and across the aisle. Democrats can be hypocrites as well. But boy, there's a real hypocrisy around the stated goals of this administration, and as it specifically relates to the Pete Hegseth thing and these, going after Venezuelan drug cartel members. And now there's talk, and you saw that Trump is saying he plans land strikes on these alleged drug traffickers very soon. He said they could attack there in Latin America. Again, he used the words very soon. And that's a real escalation of everything. But
absolutely. Not to mention, and let me point out that on True Social, which I do check, he is talking about renaming the Republican Party the Trumplican Party. Can you imagine the chutzpah, the horror of this kind of action by a president of the United States? I got to tell you something. I don't think he's stable. I don't think he belongs where he is. And the only way to stop him now, there are two ways. One of the Republicans standing up and just saying no, which they did on the Epstein files. You'll note no one is talking about that anymore. And the second thing is the Supreme Court, which will be rendering major decisions, including the one on the tariff legislation, or rather the tariff order, the executive order. And I believe that if the Supreme Court follows the law, those tariff executive order implemented will be overruled by the court, because the president doesn't have the constitutional authority. But in order for there to be anything happening here, Mark, there has to be a restoration of the balance of powers. We have a Congress that is rolling over and playing dead. We have a Supreme Court which so far has upheld most of what Donald Trump wants. And if the founders were alive, if they could see what is happening, they would be as horrified as you and I are. And I would commend to people, read the Federalist Papers. Read what our founders talked about when they talked about a balance of power and co-equal branches of government. This is beyond my comprehension. Let me make one other comment.
Let me before we get into too deep space around what I was saying before, which was the hypocrisy. I wanted to share with you, Rothmann, and with many who are watching and listening, I wanted to share with you parts of this letter. The letter is from this convicted drug trafficker. You care about drug trafficking so much, but you, Donald Trump, pardoned the single biggest cocaine pipeline operator in modern hemispheric history.
It's a disgrace.
The former Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, the man who helped deliver 400 tons of cocaine into the U.S. 400 tons. He's not a trafficker. He's like the Amazon Prime of cocaine. He had that pipeline. But Trump said that he's the victim of a Joe Biden engineered witch hunt.
It's horrific.
So the letter that he wrote to Trump is a 4-page letter. And it starts at the very top of the letter with a biblical quote. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's John 8:32. And it's addressed to His Excellency, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington. Your Excellency, he writes, I have the honor to extend to you my warmest greetings and convey my highest respect, esteem, and blessings. Mr. President, I have hesitated to send this letter knowing the immense demands of your office, but the grave injustice I now endure compels me to appeal directly to you. I write to you from a federal penitentiary unjustly serving a 45-year sentence, effectively a life sentence given my age. Just as you, President Trump, I have suffered political persecution targeted by the Biden-Harris administration.
Exactly.
Not for any wrongdoing, but for political reasons. And then he goes on, my wrongful conviction based on uncorroborated statements of convicted drug traffickers, et cetera, et cetera. It's a 4-page letter. It's part suck-up and part invented narrative. And this guy, who in his conviction reflected the hard work of so many DEA agents, so many lawyers, so much had to come together to make this case. This guy was convicted and now walks free.
Convicted by an American court. And the President of the United States is overruling it. It is a misuse of power. It is the most corrupt action. And I mean, I can go down the list with you, Mark, of all the things he's done, but people should Google this letter. Read it. Read the 4 pages. It's outrageous. It's egregious. And frankly, there's no excuse for it.
I just retired and have money to spend, says Glenn, and always plan visiting America, but there is no way in the next 5 years, just to be safe. Glenn, I believe, is in Australia. Well, Glenn, let me suggest that you send the money to us through the Patreon and PayPal links. Yeah. Yeah, put that money to work, Glenn. Okay. Money has to have something to do with it, said Hilo Karen. I mean, I agree. When you look at something like this, and most of the big moves on the part of this administration, it's transactional from an economic self-enrichment standpoint with the Trumps. There's no question.
That's why I use the term corruption.
Yeah.
When you take a look at corruption, just take a look at the profits that have gone to the Trump family. It's billions of dollars. This is not a Vicuna coat back in the Eisenhower administration. This is billions of dollars. And what I'm amazed by, what I'm astounded by, is that Republicans who call themselves the party of law and order have no regard for law and certainly no regard for order. And if they do rename themselves the Trumplican Party, which is what Donald Trump suggested, well, it would serve them right.
Well, I mean, that is a true poison pill. I hope they swallow it. It would be incredible. This guy's approval ratings are at historic lows. As long as we're talking about historic things, he makes them up. I share them with you. They're real. You know, he can say that he inherited inflation that was at historic levels never before seen. That's just total crap.
Oh, sure. Go back to Jimmy Carter. Just go back to the Carter administration.
Thank you. Double-digit inflation. But the reality is that this guy's popularity is ebbing day by day, hour by hour even. So the notion that they could rename themselves the Trumplicans, it's laughable because it's such a poison pill.
But he has power. He has the power of the presidency. And what has to happen?
And I show you those Fox News clips too, Rothmann, because, you know, he does have that propaganda machine still on blast.
I know. Look, what can I tell you? We are fighting a battle, and you and I will not cease fighting until all of this is exposed and the battle is won. Just take a look, by the way, at what happened in Tennessee last night. In a district which the Republicans should have won overwhelmingly, it was a lot closer. And it was a lot closer because there is an understanding of what is happening. I know you and I have disagreed on this in the past, but I expect come November, when I have the pleasure of being on your program again, that we will witness a Democratic victory across the board. I'm
glad you've mentioned this. By the way, what we disagree about, first and foremost, if I can use the overused phrase, is the institutions of America. You always point to the institutions. You have great faith in them. I would suggest to you the institutions are made up of people, and once you've fired all of the regulatory cops on the beat from government, you can't have faith in the institutions that are to regulate that government any longer. And I don't have great faith in the American people. They gave you Donald Trump, and I'd suggest to you that you've got a real cancer in America. And it involves racism, and it involves sexism. It involves a lot of things.
We have to expose it. We have to expose it. But I want to point out, when Adlai Stevenson gave the Godkin lectures at Harvard in 1954, he said, America's greatness is not due to our economic power or our military power. It is the documents which govern us, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, including the Bill of Rights. If we believe that those documents have any meaning in our lives, if they are really the beacons that preserve our freedom, then they have to be remembered and taught about and learned about and exposed. And Donald Trump doesn't measure up. Now, may I tell you, it's not that I am a harsh critic of Donald Trump because he's Donald Trump. I'm looking at the corruption that I am witnessing to the American system. And we are going to have to clean that out, and we will ultimately, because the American people will see the truth. I have to believe that, or else there's no hope for us here. By the way, if he can go after Somalia and the people who are Black, imagine what he can do to any other group in this country that he doesn't like.
Sure, and I'm going to get to Somalia and Minnesota in just a moment, because he's going to be deploying more ICE agents there. He's just announced it, and the Kristi Noem, who is truly a puppet on a string. She just responds right away with whatever. But I just want to be clear. I appreciate what you're saying about America and the ideals of America. Please don't misunderstand me. What I'm suggesting is those ideals need those in power to protect those ideals and aspire to those same ideals. And as you just noted, we just don't have that. So that's where we
absolutely no. We agree on that.
Okay, so let me now get to a disturbing story. So again, this is on the heels of this Somali tirade that Trump went on in the cabinet meeting. The Trump administration now is launching immigration enforcement operations in New Orleans and Minneapolis a day after he said that he'd be sending National Guard troops to Louisiana, and a day after he went off on this Somali population in America.
It's a disgrace. It's horrific. I agree.
The Department of Homeland Security saying about the New Orleans operation is a targeted operation targeting criminal aliens roaming free thanks to sanctuary policies that forced local authorities to ignore U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. ICE
they can make the same argument about San Francisco or Oakland or Los Angeles or any major city in America. That's what's horrific.
There is, I believe... Oh, you've got the Walz stuff, Kim? Do you want to play Tim Walz, who is
please play Tim. My goodness, yes.
Yeah, here is Walz talking about his home state. Go ahead.
The tragic shooting of the two National Guard service members. In the aftermath of the shooting, as you know, President Trump has responded by vowing to crack down on refugees, including from countries beyond Afghanistan, specifically targeting the Somali community in your home state. He also described you using a slur widely regarded as derogatory toward people with intellectual disabilities. I want to read for you what he said, Governor, and get your reaction on the other side. He said, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia are completely taking over the once great state of Minnesota. Somalian gangs are roving the streets looking for prey as our wonderful people stay locked in their apartments and houses, hoping against hope they'll be left alone. The seriously blank governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, does nothing either through fear, incompetence, or both. What is your response to President Trump, Governor?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me express my condolences to the families of the National Guardsmen. They're out there doing their duty. They serve us. As a commander-in-chief of the National Guard and someone who served, we have a responsibility to put them in a position where they're protected and they have a clear mission. And so I would express my condolences there. Look, Donald Trump insulting me is a badge of honor for me, but I think we all know, both as an educator for a couple decades and as a parent, using that term is just so damaging. It's hurtful. We have fought 3 decades to get this out of our schools. Kids know better than to use it. But look, this is what Donald Trump has done. He's normalized this type of hateful behavior and this type of language. And mainly, look, at first, I think it's just because he's not a good human being. But secondly, to distract from his incompetency. We know we just came through a Thanksgiving where prices are up. We know people are concerned about heating their homes as we're experiencing blizzards out here at the same time he's cutting those programs. So, look, we cannot allow this to be normalized. The people who Trump is, like this is language police. You guys are woke. Many times it's just about being decent to people and making them feel included. You can use that word, sure, you can use that language, but you shouldn't. And that's something that Donald Trump fails to realize. But again, Kristen, this is cruelness, this is meanness, it's aimed at a broader community. And as far as demonizing our Somali community, maybe he could help us on some things. Demonizing an entire community, folks who are in the professions, educators, artists, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, they bring the diversity and the energy to a place like Minnesota. And for him to just randomly decide to do this, it makes no sense. Do your job, get the criminals out, secure our border, but do it with dignity and respect to the American tradition of respecting immigrants and refugees as a beacon of hope.
Well,
yeah, there you go. I mean, I think that's a good summary of both.
Can we clarify the
role
term
of the Somali
that
community and then the role of the
retarded?
president?
Was retarded. What he wanted to do was to say the governor of Minnesota is retarded. And may I tell you, it is so appalling to me. And it should be condemned by Democrats and Republicans. And I'm not afraid to use a word like that when it is used the way Donald Trump used it. If it's blanked out, you don't know what he said.
Sure,
and it's important to know what he said so we can react to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's just a kind of a radioactivity about that word. Let me pivot to something else, Brother Rothmann, and ask you about what Trump is doing in terms of SNAP benefits. Federal monies go into a lot of states, blue states, to sort of help prop up the SNAP program. And many of these blue states don't want to share information about who's on SNAP and who's getting SNAP with the feds for a lot of reasons that have to do with immigration in large measure. I wonder if you can speak to this, because, I mean, this really can KO or, really cripple the SNAP program not to get that federal money.
You're absolutely correct. And maybe the intent of Donald Trump is to destroy the SNAP program. Let me remind everybody that food stamps, which is what the SNAP program is really all about, are essential and were supported. And do you remember the bipartisan group that got together of George McGovern and Bob Dole to save the food stamp program? Most people don't remember that, but this is typical of Donald Trump, and he is a disgrace. And the only thing I can tell you is that you are right to raise the SNAP program. Before we go, and I know you time limit me, it's just a disgrace that you do that, but it's okay. I would be remiss if I didn't say a word about Ukraine. The collapse of the mission which Donald Trump sent to the Kremlin without consulting at all with the Ukrainians in these vital talks is indicative of the arrogance of power. The word appeasement applies. Do you remember in 1938, Czechoslovakia was not involved in the Munich conference. They were a settlement was imposed on them, which of course collapsed and ultimately World War II. This action by the president with Ukraine is appalling. And you note that he lashed out at the Europeans, and so did Putin. Together, they lashed out at the Europeans. There is a real disconnect here, something that is terribly wrong. And the fact is that Zelensky is a hero. He's not a perfect person. He has problems in his own country. There's no question about it. But this is a guy who is greeted in Europe as a hero in part because he has the guts to stand up to Vladimir Putin. From Tsar to Commissar to Putin, this has been a real problem, and Russia remains a problem. Just ask the Latvians, the Estonians, the Lithuanians, the Poles. They're all shaking in their boots. And what does Donald Trump do? He sends his son-in-law and a man with no experience in negotiations to deal with Vladimir Putin. There will not be peace in Ukraine until Putin is defanged. And
so the gentleman to whom Brother Rothmann's referring is, of course, Witkoff, who is, as I've mentioned before, a golfing buddy of Trump. He's a billionaire real estate tycoon. He handled a bunch of stuff in the Middle East with Kushner. Now he's handling a bunch of stuff in Russia, Ukraine with Kushner. And when I say handling, they're going to dinner with the Russian envoy. And a lot of the money, and I mentioned when
And
I say going to
Witkoff
dinner, they're
is
socializing
advising-
with the Russian envoy before they present
Exactly.
this peace plan
Thank
to
you for pointing that out.
Ukraine. And the other thing I would say, and this is perhaps more significant, is that much of the Witkoff fortune, listen closely to what I'm telling you, much of the Witkoff fortune comes from Russia. So he has huge, huge financial pipelines into Russia. And for that reason, Witkoff is completely compromised. Witkoff, who is handling these negotiations for the U.S. to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict, is a compromised individual.
Of course.
And yet,
This whole
this is the
administration
guy
is
who's
compromised.
presenting this peace agreement to Ukraine. It's absurd.
I have to point out, you had sitting at that table the president's son-in-law, who has profited to the tune of billions of dollars through the corruption, both from Saudi Arabia and from Russia. He benefits every single day, and there is no exposure of this massive corruption. It is horrific. That's all I can say.
Yeah, well, this 28-point plan, which was, translated from the
21
Russian,
points,
apparently.
yeah, whatever it is, they reduced it. But the point is,
Right,
there's
but that was-
corruption.
right. No, it's completely, and you're right to point to the fact that Putin is threatening Europe with war. If he says, if Europe wants a war, I'll give you a war.
By the way, did you see Putin? I don't know, because I don't, unfortunately, listen every day to your program, and I apologize for that.
You listen the day you're on.
Yeah,
is that
of
really
course.
your thinking?
What?
Did you
I'm
see-
just saying. It seems like
Did you see Putin in military uniform 48 hours ago? There's a picture of which you can play of Putin sitting there in a military uniform the day before these talks with Witkoff and Kushner. It's unbelievable.
the Russians are not in a hurry for a deal.
No,
And,
they're winning
yeah.
every day.
The war of
if-
attrition does favor the Russians, it would
If
seem.
Edward R. Murrow or those who reported on World War II were all alive and stationed in Ukraine, the American people would understand the destruction, the chaos, the havoc that the Russians are raining down using missiles, using drones. It is appalling. And somebody asked me if there was a comparison. The comparison is the Spanish Civil War, where the Germans were able to test all of their equipment before World War II. That's what the Russians are doing. They're demonstrating their ability, at least in terms of technology. And may I say, my friends in Kiev are being devastated. And remember, the winter is coming. The winter is coming, and they have no power sources. It's brutality beyond words. And all I can tell you is we aren't paying enough attention to that as well.
Well, it's a pretty big mountain to climb that the Ukrainians have. And I'll say one last thing about Russia, and I think you'd back me up on this. The profile that Russia has as this superpower is completely owing to their nukes. There's
Exactly.
nothing about Russia that's a superpower apart
There's
from
no
that.
economic. I learned that lesson in 1969 when I studied in the Soviet Union. I went to their department stores, and you could see no goods at all. And if you wanted goods, as a tourist, you went to the in-tourist stores, which were special. And I can't tell you the number of people in Russia who approached me and said, "Can you get me this, that, or the other thing at the in-tourist store?" They were not an economic power. They were always a superpower because of their nuclear weapons. And that is precisely what Vladimir Putin is threatening the West with, as you have pointed out.
You can find John Rothman on his podcast. It's a daily podcast called Around the Political World with John Rothman. You can also find his work at thevoicesf.org, thevoicesf.org, and he's here with us on Wednesdays. We are delighted whenever he comes through. There's
But
no
most
love.
important, I'm on the Mark Thompson program.
Well, I'm glad we finally got that
Plug.
clear, Rothman.
And I do want to
think
say,
that's
I
most important.
enjoyed your get-together. I was able to stay for 2 hours. I was able to listen to the listeners who clearly adore you. And all I can say is their judgment may not be perfect, but their support of the Mark Thompson program is essential. And if you want this kind of quality programming, Regrettably, you won't find it on KGO anymore. But if you want this kind of quality programming, then you should contribute to the Mark Thompson program. You should support the Mark Thompson program, and you should spread the word about what is happening. And to Courtney, your long-suffering partner in crime.
That's true.
All I can say, Courtney, is I would say you have my deepest sympathy, but more important, you have my utmost respect. And Mark, I look forward. Maybe she needs both. And I look forward to being with you again.
That's not
next
fake.
Wednesday.
That's real.
Okay. All right. John, we love you. Be well, my friend. John Rothmann, everybody.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.